But something I can guarantee you, Gregg, is that we are live on Facebook for the Not Your Average Investor Show. Welcome, everybody, officially to the kickoff of the show today. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. With me, as always, is the man they call GC, because he's a gifted conversationalist, which is why he's going to be leading the interview today, and because his name is Gregg Cohen. Say hello, Gregg.
Hello, everybody. Good to be with you. So happy to be here with you, Pablo.
I'm happy. I'm really happy to be here too, man. I like, honestly, as we were kicking off for the show right now, and Marilyn is saying that she's happy for me, and it's yes, I turned 40 yesterday, but the idea that I have gone from, not just your show host, kind of like the old Hair Club for Men commercial. I don't know if you remember those, right? Like I'm not just your show host. I am now actually not your average investor as well. It's a big moment for me, man, to transition into this growing wealth for a passive and, for a future where I have these money making assets that before were so abstract to me. But before we get into all of that, welcome to our regulars here. Thank you so much for all of you that are wishing me a happy birthday. Thank you for everybody that wished me a happy birthday on Facebook as well. This is like my group of friends these days, online and in real life. The idea that you and I get to spend an hour with such fine folks as Marilyn and Jane and Lee and Miguel Angel and Jake and Leo and everybody that hangs out with us really does mean it to me, right? Like I really do feel a genuine friendship. And for anybody that is new to the show today, that if you don't know this, we go through this housekeeping every time, right? This is an interactive show. I'm going to be telling my story of my first investment, but I'm an open book, right? And Gregg is an amazing teacher. So the way to interact with us is to click that chat button on the bottom left of your screen, open it up, and then there's a little blue box that says panelists. You want to click that drop down menu and put panelists and attendees so that everybody else can gain from your insight and gain from the comments that you're making, and you can make a new friend. And then if you want a question asked, normally it's me asking for Gregg. I think today TBD, right? Like I don't know if I'm going to be able to turn that piece off. I don't know if Gregg can really turn it on. No pressure. But if you want a question asked on the show, like Lee just did, right? Click that Q&A button. Put your question in there because the chat really moves very fast. So if you populate the Q&A part, that is saved in a way that's easy for us to access, and it doesn't make us go cross-eyed. And last but not least, if this is your first time here and you want to know more just about the business model, how Gregg teaches it, which is phenomenal, go to jwbwebclass.com where you'll get our seminar and our webinar, I guess. And you get to download the free investing toolkit. And anybody that here's what I'm saying. Spoiler alert, I'm gushing over this investment. I'm super happy about it. So you may be convinced that you want to hop on a call with JWB. The best thing that you're going to want to do is go to chatwithjwb.com and pick a call with the mics, kind of like I just did, and go from there. So without further ado, Gregg, this is your big, it's time for you to be Larry King or Barbara Walters or... Yeah,
this is big, man. This is big. I have long aspired to be in the realm of Pablo and how he works his magic. I mean, you guys know him as the moderator, the ultimate hype guy. I'm sure today I'll be a poor man's Pablo's replacement here, but I'm going to do my best. And really, what we wanted to do is, Pablo's been so gracious and has said that he's totally an open book, and he thought it would be really cool just to ask him, as somebody who is a client, who is not a member of JWB, but has been associated with our message for, about a year now, talk us through that evolution and really kind of get into the nitty gritty details. And so I hope you guys take advantage of his transparency, his authenticity, and because I think it can help all of you investors out there who maybe are early on in the journey and you're still trying to get your feet underneath you. How do you get to that point where you're confident and you make a really incredible decision? So without further ado, Pablo, we're going to just kind of start it off. I thought it would be great. A lot of folks ask us how closely related you are to JWB, what your role is within the JWB marketing sphere. People see you and me on the show and on the podcast and all that. Can you just kind of like walk through kind of where you are in relation to JWB as a company?
Yes, Gregg, I would be happy to do that. Great question, by the way.
Never saw that one coming, did you?
didn't see that one coming. Uh, Gregg, I've known about JWB probably for about 10 years, right? Like I knew Alex Safakis, your co-founder and partner and best friend, through the Richies, Whitney and Rich, who have both been guests on this show, because Rich is one of my best friends from college. I don't say that I introduced him to Whitney, but I was friends with Whitney and then she came. Anyways, so I met Alex at one of their tailgating parties that they used to do in Jacksonville. He was the guy organizing the Flip Cup tournament. And I like people that like to organize fun, right? So I struck up a conversation with him. I found out what you guys were doing. A couple years after that, I knew that Rich had actually reached out to our group of friends and said that he's doing this like private lending stuff, that he's getting 10% on his money. And at the time I was looking around and I was like, I don't know what to do with my money. So I invested with JWB. We're going to talk more about that later. Made my 10%. It was a great experience. And then I didn't continue for various reasons. Then when I moved to Jacksonville a couple of years ago, I came here for this partnership that I had entered into to be VP business development for this software company. And after a year, it turned out the partnership wasn't right. And I set off to build my own company again. And it's materialized into this content marketing community creation company. And I think it was August last year, Whitney invited me to the JWB volleyball tournament, right? I am a skilled volleyball player, as you know by now. And I showed up. I was chatting it up with Alex. I was telling him what he was doing. He's like, "Oh, you got to go talk to Gregg." And that's when I met you, man. So we actually shared a court together first, which I think was serendipitous because you got to see my skills. And after that, I knew that you were embarking on this journey of making content to educate people, to make sure that everybody is building wealth the way that you've learned how and share your knowledge. And I knew at the time I could help you, but you were just kind of getting started. So then fast forward to the golf tournament that just, I just got all the TBTs from Facebook.
Right.
And we were chatting it up after you had a little body of evidence, and we met up and I told you kind of what my formula is for how to do this in a way that doesn't take up too much of your time, that adds immense value to everybody involved. And we met up for happy hour, talked about it. And a month later, the Not Your Average Investor show was born. So the short answer is I am a service provider to JWB. As this relationship has grown and getting to know your story, I've become obsessed with your company because I'm so incredibly impressed. Throughout 2020, you have been the guy that I've spent the most time with, right? Thanks to coronavirus and the nature of our work. And you've become one of my best friends. So, in full disclosure, I am, you are my client, you're one of my best friends, and I'm a huge fan of the company, but I am also an investor now, right? I have been spending all this time behind the mic, talking to you and seeing you answer these questions and seeing the other client journeys, and a couple of key moments that I'm sure we're going to get into made me really just think, I need to grow up and start doing this, quite frankly.
It's been really cool because, this last year of our conversations, they have taken a very different tone at very different points in time, right? At first, it was us just totally talking about this marketing angle that we wanted to really make a reality, that we felt like there was this opportunity to create great value and to have fun doing it. And that's what the show has become. And then through the conversation, it's gone a lot into investing. And, from your questions on investing, that has turned into great topics on the show and other things that we can do to create value. But, your investing journey hasn't been like most, right? You have invested in private lending, then you decided not to invest in private lending for a period of time. And now you have the opportunity to do private lending and you're choosing to buy your first turnkey rental property. Can you walk people through your mindset at each one of those maybe key milestones there for you?
Yeah, that's funny, man, how you phrase it like that. I invested in private lending. Now that I think about it, it must have been almost exactly 5.5 years ago, because I invested, I went in, I knew that it was going to be this like 2-year note. At the time, I think your minimum was 25. I think I put 25 grand into it. Mm-hmm. I was really pumped up about it, but I didn't really understand I didn't understand this whole mechanism, right? Like I was just kind of going like, oh, well, Rich said he's getting 10%. I know this Alex guy. I know, Rich guaranteed me that they never don't pay anybody back, right? Like that really was where I was at, right? I know that we're two best friends, and kind of like our other common best friend was just like, nah, I do this other stuff because he's like a high powered lawyer and he's got access to these things. I was like, I'm going to go here. So I put the money there. And then as the last election was rolling up, I was in a moment where, number one, I was just recently married, right? Like I had been married for maybe about a year. And I was thinking, okay, once my wife had just graduated grad school and she was starting to, make, she had a job, right? Like she was finally like earning some income. And I at the time thought, well, I need to buy my home in Miami. So I wanted to kind of, and Miami is super, super overpriced. So like I knew I'd have to go all in to buy a home in Miami. So I kind of, and at the same time, the election was happening. I knew that there was like a big period of uncertainty that was going on. I thought that played a role in the equation, right? But in reality, more than anything, it was this idea that I need all my acorns in place just in case I buy a home. And what ended up happening is that I didn't buy a home. I didn't invest that money. It just kind of sat there, making like 1%, maybe a little bit less for forever. And fast forward to come into Jacksonville, being the VP of this company. At this point, I'm earning a good living. My wife is able to take a year off. I still have that money saved away. And when I left the company, I then needed that money to kind of like fund what my next phase was, right? Until my wife got a job and I built up this company enough to get some income. And as I'm doing that, of course, you are my key client that has helped me build the company to what I've been able to build it to, right? And it's been an amazing experience. But I'm now at the point where I have a certain amount of money earmarked, right? Like I have about $80,000 liquid
Mhm.
that I had been sitting on for this company, for a house, blah blah blah, whatever. And as I'm like progressing through the show, I'm asking you, man, should I buy a home? Does it make sense to invest in a rental income property before buying a home? That was one of these like long morning runs that you talked me through it. And at the end of the day, it was a maybe, right? Like, we kind of left it at like, depends on your situation, depends if this is for you. So then I started looking at homes here in Jacksonville. And I thought to myself, man, if I buy one of these homes in like a $200,000 to $250,000 range, it's going to be my first time buying a home, so I can get it at 3.5%,
Mhm.
right? That 3.5% down payment. That's going to leave me enough to invest in a rental income property, and it's going to leave me enough for a rainy day fund,
Mhm.
right? So then the thought was, okay, I'm going to go out, try and buy a home, and then rent, and then invest in a property. And as stuff started kind of progressing, right? Like my company's doing better, my wife's doing really, really great in her career. We started looking around and thinking, you know what? If if we wait a little while longer, we can buy a home in the $300,000 to $350,000 range
Mhm.
and be in the home that we want to be in for the next 40 years.
Mhm.
So I'm not going to make a move on that. But now, thanks to being a fly on the wall for all these conversations, slash, the beneficiary of all the knowledge of spending time with you and really trying to understand it in order to bring as much value to people, it dawned on me that then the move is to buy the rental income property now, because that is not going to change, right? Like that is, we're in that moment in time where the interest rates are so effective, so beneficiary, that I want to take advantage of that, and I know that that's going to pay for itself and be generating cash flow. And then on top of that, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad after 100 people on this show had come on and said the same thing, and everybody in the chat. And the moment I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and I understood the whole like asset versus liability piece of the equation, and my wife and I had that conversation about, okay, let's just wait till we get to like 350 grand, kind of like availability, and be comfortable with that. It just made all the sense in the world to move on the property right now.
You've just taken all of our listeners through an incredible journey of really thinking about a way of directing your funds in a way that is very different than how the vast majority of Americans think, right? And if I understand it correctly, it's even very different than how you thought maybe 5 years ago, right? If we had been talking 5 years ago, you had an investment that was earning 10% interest, which happened to be private lending at that time, and you pulled that back. And my understanding is that at that point you were thinking about going strong into buying a property in Miami to live in that would have been way expensive, and that capital that could have been earning monthly income for you was going to go towards that house, right? And what we talk a lot about is opportunity cost, right? And most Americans, when they're thinking about where to put their funds, they don't consider the opportunity cost. They're thinking about, the house, the max house that I can afford, right? That's a very common one. And they don't often think about what potential monthly income could I be driving from that same amount. You've gone down this incredible journey now to the point where you took a big leap and you said, okay, well, in the beginning of our conversations, it was, well, how can I do both, right? How can I buy my primary residence in Jacksonville right now and buy this rental property, which can produce rental income? And then you just took another leap, which when you and I were preparing for the show last week, I didn't even realize. Now you've taken the leap because of really this kind of this environment you've surrounded yourself with to say, hey, you know what? This isn't the right time for me to be able to buy my primary residence. If I take this capital I have right now, buy rental properties with it right now, produce this income, how much greater will my ability to be able to do that primary residence be when I have that solid financial footing and passive income coming? So that's an incredible journey. I hope everybody who's on the show, take this opportunity to ask some questions about that, because that's just not natural. I mean, can you talk people through really, I mean, how did that conversation go with Marta? Right. I mean, that's not normal. Marta hasn't been a part of this show. So like, how's this going with you within your family? Why does it make so much sense to everybody around you now?
Gregg, as you know, I am by profession a marketer. By nature, I'm a relationship builder and the believer of having a network around you and the benefits of all of that. And to me, this is a exemplary story in that, right? Like, if you remember, my first idea was, man, I got this old 401k that has like 120 grand. Why don't I just use that? I wanted, number one, as a hype man, as a natural promoter, I wanted to get in the game, right? Like I felt a genuine disconnect between, I don't know if it's a disconnect or just FOMO, right? Like I saw everybody doing really, really well that had put money with you guys, that had these rental income properties. And I wanted in, just because if you surround yourself with enough people doing something that's working for them, you're naturally gonna want to take a part of it, especially a guy like myself, right? So at first I was thinking, man, maybe I can do it with my IRA. You kind of broke it down to me in the sense that you could do that, but then you could go sideways if you don't have enough in reserve there to just make sure that it all stays there, and you can't just commingle funds, right? So that went away. And then when I started kind of doing the math of, all right, I can have like a $15,000 rainy day fund, I can have down payment for a house, and I can have this like down payment for a JWB turnkey rental income property. At that point, I really, really wanted to make it happen. And I kept on, I was looking at that math, and it all made sense. And it was really Marta who just said to me, she's like, listen, I don't see why we need to go get a $250,000 house if, when again, Alex has been sending me these listings, right? Like, you guys are doing me the favor of sending me the property listings of things that are available, right? We took a really good look at the market, and it became very obvious to us that in this echelon of 200 to 250,000 is like one type of house that's good enough. And then in the next echelon up, there's this house that like I'd be super pumped to live in, right? Mm-hmm. So Marta doesn't come from the US. She's not obsessed with this whole like home ownership is the only way to do it, right? Like I had a great benefit of her outside perspective, and thanks to her perspective, and then what I've learned here, I was like, okay, then at that point I was educated enough to be like, then in that case, I think the move is, let's just stack some more acorns on, let's keep that money there and grow it. And as my company does better, as you do better in your company, which, by the way, I think I'm poised for a great 2021. So it could be as soon as 6 months to a year to be there financially. But either way, this asset, what we are buying right now, I've just really grown to understand it as an ATM machine, man. Like, and why wouldn't I want it, right? Like, understanding the model where you have taken so many data points and you have much experience that you have this like really, really high level of certainty of what this certain cash flow is going to be for at least 2 years, because I know that my tenant is there for 2 years and it's already rented and it's going to be taken care of. And all I have to worry about is, you know, when the next turn is going to happen. And there's a 75% chance that that turn's not going to be for another 5 years. It just makes perfect sense to just stack $250 a month up until that happens, while owning this home that is getting paid down. That I don't explain it as well as you do, Greg, but like I've just heard it so many times, and I've seen it with my own eyes because of the seat that I have the good fortune to sit in, that I now just take it as a truth, to be perfectly honest.
I
So
think
yeah, again, we were talking before this call, and my insecurity is that you're going to ask me a couple of things. I'm going to be like, well, they're going to be like, Pablo's an unsophisticated investor. He's just throwing money to the wind. And maybe it sounds like that, but I think the other side of it is just the idea that I have seen behind the curtain here, and like there's nothing about you and your partners and the organization you've built and the business model that you've created, and the process that you go through, that doesn't make 100% sense to me. And I feel like I would be a sucker if I didn't get in on it. Like,
I mean, I think you are speaking really for most of the people that are watching this show right now, most of our clients as well, right? I mean, very few of our clients would go to a party and introduce themselves as a real estate investor, right? You're not going to go to a party and introduce yourself as a real estate investor, right? They want to have real estate in their portfolio, and they don't want to know all of the details that we happen to know and do all of the due diligence that we happen to know on an individual neighborhood and metrics and all this good stuff. They want to do their due diligence on the model and the team. That's what you're buying into. It's
100%.
incredible. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people think that you have to be an expert to do well in this. You don't have to be an expert. You have to find the right team of experts. You have to do your due diligence, make sure that they know what they're doing, and then you can leverage their experience, leverage their model, leverage their systems so that you can enjoy it too, right? We were just talking about this before the show, and we were doing a separate marketing video for one of these ad campaigns that we're going to do. And you were saying to me, hey, listen, what bothers you so much that you need to speak out? And I'm just like, man, people think that this has to be hard. People in their mind think that owning real estate has to be hard. And it's proven, because if you ask people out there what the long-term best investment for them is, according to a Gallup poll, people say that the best investment is real estate. But if you ask those same people, what do they have in their portfolio? It's like the 5th most popular option behind like bonds and savings accounts and, of course, stocks and everything else. And it just doesn't make sense. Like, what bothers me is that people's actions when it comes to this investment don't line up with their beliefs. And if I can just show them a way that it's easy, then their actions and their beliefs are going to line up. They're probably going to be a lot more successful than what they were doing before.
Greg, can you say now click below? Because I really want to cut this and use that.
You know what? I struggled saying that when we were talking about it before.
That was exactly what I wanted you to say, for the record.
Oh man. Hey, there was a couple of really important things that I wanted just to drill in there. One of the questions that we've talked about, especially on the show with Jen Filzen, is it the right thing to buy my primary residence before rental properties, or is it the right thing to buy rental properties before a primary residence? And as you and I were talking about this in your specific situation, it wasn't the same answer as I gave for Jen. Jen happens to live in California. Can we talk about our conversation and how that landed on you when we were talking about, was it the right move for you to buy your primary residence, or was it the right move for you to buy your rental properties?
Yeah, man, we can talk about that conversation. And really that conversation, when I was in Miami, if I would have known all of this, I would have acted so much faster, right? Like the idea of, I can't tell you how frustrating it is to live somewhere where you need to pay $500,000 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom place that you're going to have to renovate, and it's half an hour away from where you want to live. That sucks, man. Yeah. Like it, like that to me has never made sense. And as I was doing that decision, I'm just like, plus I got to pay this like PMI because of this jumbo loan and all this crap. And it's just like all this unnecessary debt that I'd be paying into for no reason, um, other than to have that badge on my chest that said I own my own home, and other than like not having to move away and not deal with Miami landlords, right? Once I got to Jacksonville, for the first time ever, I felt blessed that I could actually afford something in an area where I would be really, really pumped to live in. And it wouldn't be, even though once I started looking at the pricing, it was like a house that I'd like to live in, not love to live in. It was still a house I would like to live in and a place I would like to live in, right? Like so at that point, I'm like, oh man, I just feel lucky that's there. But our conversation, really that first conversation, Greg, was something that I had in the back of my mind for a really, really long time. And I feel really fortunate that I could spend a 45 minutes running at a 10-minute mile pace and talk to somebody that is of your ilk and expertise to just give me the real lowdown on it. But what I took away from it was that I'm not weird for thinking this, right? Like what I took away from it was that just because there is this conventional wisdom and this like belief around real estate in the United States and the need to own your own home, I had always had this thesis that no. Owning a home is an emotional decision. It means that you love the place you live and you never really want to move. So you're just going to go ahead and own this home so that you can make it yours. You know that your kids never have to go to a different school and all these things. That makes perfect sense to me. But as you know, Greg, we're not having kids. So to put myself through that filter, I was just like, this doesn't ring true to me. So it really, really helped somebody like you that had kids, that has kids, that lives that life, that understands it all at a high level, to tell me that I'm not crazy in thinking this, man. That's really what I remember the most about it, because I needed to hear it, or else I was going to get stuck in what my previous circle of influence had to say about it.
Absolutely. And that's the circle of influence that most people subscribe to. And buying your primary residence may be the right thing for you, depending on where you live in the country or what your circumstance is. But it's okay to at least understand why it may or why it may not, right? Really what it comes down to is this concept of opportunity cost, right? And when, Pablo's thinking about buying his primary residence here in Jacksonville, the opportunity cost of buying his primary residence here in Jacksonville is much different than the opportunity cost of Jen Filzen buying her primary residence in California, right? Pablo, the price ranges you were looking at for your primary residence when we were talking about this originally was about 250 or so?
Right now in Jacksonville, yeah, I was
Yeah.
looking at 2 to 250.
So at a price point of 250, right? That's very different than the price point of $1 million plus, right? For that decision in California, that down payment, call it $200,000 of down payment, could be used to generate a lot of income on a monthly basis, right? And at the same time, for that purchase in California of a primary residence, your mortgage payment is going to be so much more than what you could pay in rent. So when we're talking about opportunity cost, we're talking about both of those elements. And that's why it is such a no-brainer in a place like California, New York, Virginia, these high-priced markets, to at least look and consider what the opportunity cost is. Now, it's not the same equation when you come to Jacksonville. And what Pablo and I talked about is it's a much more, you're going to be fine either way you decide, right? Because in Jacksonville, when you're buying a property at 250, right, you're not giving up a tremendous amount of additional earnings every single month. Your payment on your mortgage payment is not going to be substantially more than what you would pay in rent, right? Like it would be if you were in California. So the opportunity cost is lower here in Jacksonville. And then let's be honest, sometimes there are family dynamics and things that you need to do to make sure that it's the right thing for your family, that owning the house makes sense. So it wasn't a yes, you need to buy your primary, or no, you don't. It was a, hey, let's go into this eyes wide open and understand what's more important for me at this situation. And I love how you came to your own conclusion there. Of course, the rental properties is the right thing for you, but it doesn't mean that's the right thing for everybody.
Yeah, man. And listen, let's get into some of this right here, right? So Margaret Smith is putting in here, Pablo, did you consider buying a duplex and renting the other half out? Does Gregg offer turnkey duplexes, right? So Margaret, I'll answer that first piece. And by the way, I would like to also encourage anybody Margaret, you're an example of this, right? You are only chatting to us because the blue box says panelists and not panelists and attendees. If and Aaron going as well, you too. If you can hit panelists and attendees so everybody sees it, I think everybody's the better for it, right? But Margaret, to answer your question, yeah, I considered buying a duplex and renting the other half out. I think that's like what everybody thinks to do when they first start wanting to invest in real estate. Um, I'm too lazy to do that, right? Like I am so busy building up my business and doing these other things that I did not. I mentally right now think of the idea of getting out there myself, sourcing a duplex that fits that parameter, buying it, renovating it, playing landlord, and I'm just like, that's not for me, man. That's that type of overthinking is what would stop me from doing this. And as far as the turnkey duplex stuff, if that's what
Yeah.
you want to answer there, Greg.
Well, so we have a different take on it. So we love the idea of duplexes, triplexes, quads, right? Getting more units under one roof. There's nothing wrong with that idea. But in Jacksonville, the housing stock, the way that the neighborhoods are set up, is that they just weren't built that way. So if you want to focus on buying duplexes, triplexes, quads in Jacksonville the way it is here, you have to go to neighborhoods that don't meet the threshold for where we want to have you build your cash flowing portfolio, right? In other words, the neighborhoods don't meet our threshold. They're lower income than we want to be. There's higher crime, higher turnover, and ultimately lower returns there for the investors. And we're not willing to sacrifice that just to get to quads and all that good stuff. But we do have a solution in place, right? And the solution is townhomes. Many people don't really understand how townhomes can work for you to build your cash flowing portfolio, but we've been able to build townhomes and they're in our neighborhood. So they meet that threshold. We love to manage those properties. And a townhome basically is very similar to a duplex, triplex, quad, right? It might be 4 units under one roof, which is the same economy as a scale you're looking for. In fact, there's a lot of advantages when it comes to purchasing and financing when that you're able to actually purchase and finance townhomes much easier than you are multifamily properties like quads, triplexes, and duplexes. So we get to the end result, which is for some investors having 4 units, maybe 6 units under one roof, and those economies of scale are there. You can get that through townhomes, and we love townhomes. We have townhomes. It's just not technically a duplex. It's a townhome that has 2 units under one roof, or it's a 4-unit townhouse rather than a quadruplex. But that's really the only major difference there.
I'm glad you said that, Greg, because at first when I was looking around and stuff, I'm like, I have this eye out for duplexes as well because it sounds like a good compromise between owning a big property and having your own space and the shared expenses of like living and not having a huge footprint. But every time that I would point out a duplex to Marta, and I'm like, what about that place? She's like, dude, you want to live here?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I don't think like that, right? So,
yeah. And there's a threshold that we've got to get to make sure this is a cash flow neighborhood, and then there's the threshold that we have to get to make sure Marta really wants to live there. There's a couple of different thresholds there, so probably duplex is probably not going to be in your.
Yeah, it's true. Like, listen, like the majority of duplexes in Jacksonville have a trailer park right behind it, right? So like it's like that, or at least that's what I've seen in the beach area that I've like pointed out, right? So like it freaks her out. Miguel Angel Sanudo said something here in the question and answer where he goes, "There's also a down in the investment, and this is when tenants don't pay. Then all invoices keep coming, and you don't have any income to face them." And Miguel Angel, that was a big fear for me. All I can say is I have really begun to believe the statistical numbers of what JWB does. So while I think that there is a 2% chance that I go through this experience, in my head, the mathematical equation is there's a 2% chance I go through that experience at some point in the next 2 to 3 property turns. I have not heard the idea that is happening right now for anybody that's buying a property right now. So like we've talked about this in the past, anybody that bought a property pre-COVID is more at risk of this happening than somebody post-COVID because now that I understand your selection criteria and what's happening, I don't think that there's going to be another major disruption that could happen. The disruption already happened. So people applying for the homes now are most likely not going to have that issue. So Miguel Angel, real fear, but that is how I rationalize it.
And you bring up a really good point about, the major risk of a huge disruptor like COVID is right when it happens, or for the investors who invested right before it happened, right? We are all dealing with COVID, but it is a 7-month-old issue that we're dealing with now. And businesses, and of course our business, has made sure to adjust to make sure that those people that are renting from us today are able to meet the standards to rent in a COVID world. And another thing to point out, Miguel, you bring up such a good point that, there are going to be issues that are going to happen. The more houses you own and the longer you own them, there are definitely going to be issues. What I think is really, hopefully it helps all of our investors sleep well at night, is that we prepare for this ahead of time, and it's on your expected returns. We know that based on this huge sample size that we've been tracking all of our cash flow in for our clients and all of our expenses and all of our vacancy costs, right? And any months where the resident doesn't pay rent, but you still have to make that mortgage payment, right? Or the resident doesn't pay rent and you still have a maintenance bill like you're talking about. We see how that performs overall. And we have a lot of confidence that over time, that's how it's going to perform for Pablo. That's how it'll perform for our other clients. And that type of preparation allows you to prepare for a rainy day. So for a renovated home that we talked about on last week's the Thursday property of the week, we looked at a 3% expected cost for vacancy cost and a 6% expected cost for maintenance costs. And that's a percentage of the rents. Well, we get those numbers, of course, from all of the tracking that we have done over the years. But, the conversation with Pablo, if you haven't had it yet with the mics, it's soon going to happen as you get to closing and you start to talk about it with your portfolio manager, is, hey, listen, the cash flow that you're collecting on a certain month, that's not yours to keep and then just go and spend, right? Part of that, you're going to give some of that back, right? Over time, you will give some of that back in the form of maintenance costs and vacancy costs. The majority of it will be when you have a property turn, which, like Pablo was saying, doesn't happen on average, except for every 4.5 years. For an average resident of JWB, they stay 4.5 years. So it's great. I love that you bring up the point. I think it's just solved by proper preparation and expectation setting, and just making sure that we can coach and guide our clients all along the way.
Yeah, and Greg, I think when you bring up the proper preparation and expectation setting, I really can't discount the fact that I have seen the way that you and your team prepare for absolutely everything, right? Like when you first brought me into that Tuesday morning meeting, and I realized that JWB isn't just it is a company unlike anything else that I have ever experienced, right? Like I have never in my life sat in a 1-hour all staff meeting about general topics where every seat in the house is fully engaged, right? Like that was a major eye opener for me. And I was like, wow, these guys are different. Right. And as I've stayed within the ecosystem to be able to tell the story and be of value to you, and like, what else can we talk about and this and that, right? I went from this like aha moment of, wow, how do they do this? How do they not only do they keep everybody's attention for an hour willingly, and have this like case study of what a business looks like in a business school textbook, where it's like 50% men, 50% women, different colors and ethnicities sprayed around everywhere, with people in leadership positions of all types and shape, right? Like that visually struck me. And as we move on in our planning, and I see behind the scenes of how you account for 3 years worth of inventory, and you have a full year of cash flow on reserve, and you have, like all these different provisions that I have had the privilege to see that you take, because I'm in there, number one, as somebody trying to tell a story. Number two, as a service provider that's being expected to follow suit. So and three, hearing all the conversations first person from the people living it, it really just makes me believe that these aren't just like freak statistics, like that these data points that you've developed are not an accident. And I can really, really buy into this past performance because I see very clearly that it has been modeled that way on purpose, and I can expect it that way. And if something freak happens where the behavior of my investment is way out of whack from that, freak things happen, man. And I just, after seeing that and knowing that I can take that cash flow, continue to sit, continue to build another pile of stuff that can pay for whatever contingency happens there, or even better, buy me another house that can keep feeding that beast and do that, 4C or waterfall effect or whatever it's called, man. I needed to get a piece. Like I can't tell you how inadequate I would feel not investing in this with what I know is the best way that I can put it. And I wish that everybody could have that experience, but because not everybody can, I need to make the best of this amazing advantage that I've been given, right? Like quite selfishly.
I think it's awesome that when you're answering questions from the audience or my questions or whatnot, every one of your answers has somehow talked about how you feel about this team, right? Every single answer is, I have seen how this team operates. I've seen how they prepare their clients. I've seen the metrics that guide how we make sure that we have enough runway for our clients to have cash flowing properties, whatever it is. And that's when people are investing in rental properties. If you want this to be passive, do the due diligence on the team like Pablo has, right? The property is where a lot of investors spend so much time looking at the numbers. And I don't want to discount, of course, looking at the numbers. You know how much I love numbers. But if they spent the same amount of time or twice the amount of time getting under the hood of that provider, they would make better choices. And that's what you've done, Pablo, right? Let's talk about it. You know very little about the property that you actually purchased, right? I mean, and this is very normal for most of our clients, right? This isn't built for you to get under the hood of every single property, right? So I guess, as we're kind of wrapping up the show, I know we've got some really great questions, so I want to make sure we have some more time for that. But I wanted to paint this picture, right? All right, 2 years ago, before we had met on that volleyball court, right, and before we had started to put our baby together here of the Not Your Average Investor Show, did you ever think that in an election year, which was one of the reasons you decided not to reinvest in private lending, do you ever think that in an election year, during a pandemic, which hadn't happened for 100 years, which freaked out a whole lot of investors out there, that you would not be buying your primary residence, you'd be buying a rental property, and that you would probably never even seen that rental property? Did you ever think that would be possible?
Greg, 12 months ago, no part of me would have ever foreseen that happening in any way. Simple answer.
If you could crystallize it into, one sentence or phrase, I mean, what was the turning point that you just said, this is right for me?
I don't know if I can crystallize it into one sentence or phrase. I can tell you 3 critical moments in this journey. First one was when we had Rich on here, and as a mortgage professional, he's just like, yeah, man, like, I'm a mortgage guy. I see these rates, and it's pretty clear to me that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like, this is investing in during 2010, knowing that it's 2010 and knowing that all this stuff is going to happen. That coming from Rich was really just like, oh, okay, I need to figure this out a little bit better than just being the funny guy on the show. 2 was when Jen and Renee were on the show. And not only was it now a conversation with you where you're just like, it's not weird to think that way, but Jen and Renee live that life, right? They are 2 people that have their own business, that don't have kids, that have bought multiple income properties living in a high price market of California. And I was like, I mean, not only is it not weird, but it's happening, right? So that, and then I think the final nail in the coffin was when I finally listened to Lee and Marilyn and everybody here that has been telling me I got to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And, once I recommend anybody does it, right? It was about like a 6-8 hour audio book. Like that's 5 podcasts. So I listened to Rich Dad Poor Dad, and, halfway through Rich Dad Poor Dad, I was like, okay, I get it now. I need to make a move here. So it was really those three things, and everything else around it is just noise, Greg, right? Like I think you know this, but it's clear to me that everything else around it is just noise. This is a unique class of asset all unto itself that needs to be considered. And the model that JWB has created with the team that they have put together is unlike anything that I've ever experienced before. And I really just feel super duper lucky that I've gotten to see it all like with my own eyes, right? So it's serendipitous, right?
It's awesome, brother. It's awesome, man. Really have just enjoyed being a part of your journey, man. It's been awesome. Those runs have been great. It's been great to hear your thoughts, because I really feel like you speak for the people that are listening to our show, and just to watch your progression and to see you be a champion of it now, and of course to make decisions with your money that follow suit, gives me, it's pretty awesome, man. I appreciate you letting me in on that.
Man, buddy, as you know, you have been a profoundly positive influence in my life. I don't shut up about that. So, I'm glad I could shine a little bit back on you. You wanna do some of these questions? You want to knock these questions out?
Yeah, we've got a couple of for you. Lee's got just a couple. This one, pretty simple here. He said, "Is Pablo buying the house with regular banking financing?"
Regular banking financing. I'm putting 20% down, and looks like a really attractive, looks like really attractive on the interest on the return.
The deal is the debt right now. The deal is the
Yeah.
debt. So let's see here. This one's from Zach Correa. He says, "Aloha, Pablo. Goal setting is a question of your life goals. What are your goals for your real estate business? How well do your investments align with these goals?"
Aloha, Zach. My I, I'd be lying if I told you that I have a super duper formulated goal set. I feel pretty ordinary in saying I would love to have $10,000 a month recurring revenue, right? Like I think that's kind of like the benchmark that everybody says. If I can get to that, man, that's fantastic. Living in Jacksonville now that I live here, and I really see no reason to ever live anywhere else. I know that I can live really, really, really well for about 75 grand a year, to be perfectly honest. So I'm really not that financially motivated, but I am very lifestyle motivated. And if that number of reaching that level of, if I can get to like $5,000 to $7,000 a month in passive income recurring revenue in the next 15 years, that makes it really interesting for the options that now open up for my wife or I to live a certain lifestyle and to be able to, not have to worry so much about whether she's employed or, what kind of year my business needs to have or anything else, right? Like vacations that we want to take, the idea of taking my parents on a vacation instead of always just joining whatever they're doing, right? Like stuff like that gets really, really interesting. And then the third piece I would say is I'm the most American person in my family, and I'm like the most different person in my family, right? Like my family is a small, it's a big nucleus, but it's a tightly tightly put together nucleus of either first generation immigrants or still live abroad somewhere else. And I think that if I can show my unconventional wisdom to the next generation in my family, then that need for the old school kind of mentality of you never want to grow too far outside of a bubble, I can shatter that. And I can really like set the plate for my nieces and my nephews to understand that, yeah, man, it's cool to call your own shot and go do it your own way, even though there's this whole body of evidence that in the past, everything else has also worked.
Wow, brother. That's really great, man. I appreciate just the transparency in every single one of those answers. I love that you started off by saying, "You know what? I don't have this all figured out," because we don't. We all don't have this all figured out. That, obviously there's a planning component that JWB helps with, but you don't have to have this whole thing figured out to get started, right? You just get started. You figure it out along the way. You have a good partner. And I just think your goal of bringing this sort of idea or knowledge or experience to your nieces and your nephews, pretty awesome, man. When you have bigger goals that are much bigger than yourself, you're much more likely to accomplish them. So that is pretty incredible, my friend. Would it be all
Cool.
right if we got to some more kind of a little more tactile questions here for you?
Bro, I'm all in. I'm all in.
Marilyn, our friend Marilyn from Homosassa.
Home of the manatees.
We love Marilyn. Thank you for being here, Marilyn. She said,
Can I just say that Marilyn put a manatee GIF on my Facebook wall as a birthday greeting, and it really made my day. It was
did
amazing.
she? Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
My birthday's coming up soon, so I'm just gonna put that out there. That would be, you can put 2 of them on mine and just make sure I one up Pablo. That would be incredible.
It's petty. That's petty.
Marilyn asked, did you buy a new build or a rehabbed home, and how did you decide?
It is a rehabbed home, Maryland. I decided because it was time to purchase, and I said I have this much money, and what can you put me in? Right. So, quite frankly, I knew that it was going to end up being a rehab home because I have a lower down payment to put forth. So I assumed that it was going to be a rehab home, and the team showed me a property and I was like, okay, sounds good. 12% return, like all the stuff that I've been learning here. And I just said, okay, it's true. The property really is very secondary to me. It's funny how you said it. I really am buying into the team here, man. I had never thought of it that way. And it's funny that you guys are always talking about like the number one thing people invest in is our team. And then second is blah, blah, blah. And you guys really told that line. And I've always been like, oh, what a brilliant marketing tactic. But now that I think about it, I'm like, no, that's literally what I'm investing in. so it makes sense.
These questions are like, yeah, I just trust the team. I understand how they make decisions. I know that it's going, it's like you're revealing it to yourself, right?
Yeah. I hadn't realized that. Yeah.
Have you ever been to the property that you have under contract to purchase?
No.
Of course not. Right? No. You're buying into the team. Miguel asked, how long do you have to wait on average to have your first tenant in place? Do you want to take this one for your specific example?
Yeah. So mine is kind of a weird one. My tenant is already there and they've been living in it and they just renewed their lease. So my tenant's there. And from what I understand from the hundreds of conversations we've had here, nobody waits till their tenant is in place, right? But you can answer that, Greg.
Well, yeah. So it is very normal to have your tenant in place at the time of closing, which is what, of course, Pablo has here. So that's normal for everybody because you're going to be cash flow positive from day one. The unique thing is that this one was actually rented at the time it was put under contract by Pablo. So that's not normal. That happened to be the case here, which is always great. If that can happen, we all love that. It's just not normal. Most of the times when you all are putting your homes under contract with JWB, we're going to walk through the numbers. We're going to put it under contract. We're going to let you know that the resident isn't in place at that time. And that's just because it just got renovated. It might not even be completed more than a couple of days of renovation, or the new build might not have completed more than a few days. We're good, but we're not that good. We're not always going to get a new resident in your home in 2 or 3 days before we put it under contract. But you have 30 to 45 days from the time you put it under contract to the time that you close on the house. And that's when we fill the home with your resident so you can be cash flow positive at day one. All right, Pablo, we got about 5 minutes left to go. I think we got a couple of more questions here. And I know once I usually say that, 2 or 3 more trickle in. So we're going to go a little bit more. This is from Eddie. This one, I think we can both probably answer this, or maybe I'll take this one. But he says, does JWB recommend 1 year of reserves for PITI plus reserves of maintenance and vacancy cost? If not, then what is JWB's recommendation on all of those? From Eddie. Do you want me to take that one, or
I can say how I'm thinking about it, and then you tell me the way that someone should think about it, right?
Yep.
Eddie, I see it as if I have 15 grand liquid, I should be all right, right? Like I know that the house I'm getting has a pretty recent roof. It has a pretty recent HVAC. I come from the contracting world. I know that that's the most expensive stuff to redo, and with 15 grand, I know that whatever $6,000 to $10,000 thing that happens, I can handle it. Plus I can also handle having a vacant property for 6 months as well. And that's kind of my number. I don't know if that's the right number, but Greg, you can answer it.
I would say that's conservative. I love your approach, right? At the core of this, you want to make sure this is passive. And a big part of enjoying this experience is making sure that you're never unprepared for a maintenance swing or a vacancy swing, right? I see this often with rental property investors out there. Their returns might be good, but it was that unexpected swing where they have to dip into their personal bank account and to take money out of their personal bank account to pay for this unexpected swing, that really rubs them the wrong way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to prepare you in advance for what your expected maintenance and vacancy costs should be on a percentage basis. And then, but it's up to you to actually set aside those reserves. So Pablo, you said $15,000. I think that's probably a lot more than you need. But if that's what makes you sleep well at night, then we're going to say do that, right? What I would tell people to do is look at this like any other business, or like any other, or like your personal funds. When you're preparing for a rainy day, what you generally are told to do is to look at it and prepare for 3 to 6 months of expenses being set aside for a rainy day fund. You can do the same thing in rental properties. If you look at your expenses on a rental property, depending on the property, it might be somewhere between maybe $750 a month to $1,000 a month. So if you're 3 to 6 months set aside, you're somewhere around $3,000 to maybe $6,000 set aside in a bank account. And the reality is that's going to be there. You're going to set it there. It's going to be liquid. And when something unexpected happens, right? Can you have a property turn that costs $3,000 or $4,000? You can. It can happen, right? It's not normal. That's way higher than our average, but it can happen. In that moment, when it happens, you're pulling from money that's already set aside in this bank account. You're going to be much happier about it versus if you had to pull from your regular bank account, cause all that stress. Maybe it causes stress with the other family finances that you have. We're trying to avoid that. So 3 to 6 months of your expenses is a general guideline. Somewhere $3,000 to $6,000 is pretty common.
Okay, good to know.
All right. Marilyn asks, what neighborhood is your investment in?
It's funny, Marilyn, when I saw that question pop in, I kind of panicked because I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's in the north side, right? Like I think it's in the north side neighborhood. But once again, man, to me, these things are widgets, right? Like I think that I'm buying a house from JWB like I would buy a shoe from Nike, right? So like all I need to know is that it's a running shoe, and that it's going to feel a certain way. That's it. Yeah, like I'm really not worried about where the house is or anything like that, because I know the story of the house and I know the team that is handling all of it.
Hey, buddy, you're getting some love from the comments here. Margaret said, Pablo, you're truly a great addition to the show. Keep on keeping on, brother. People
All
are
right,
just loving
thanks,
it.
Margaret. I gotta say, I feel really weird that I'm not like actively monitoring the comments because I'm trying to stay here and like give value. So, I know that there was something going on. I think Leo got his first property. Congrats, Leo, or he's putting something under contract. Anyways, thank you, everybody. Like whatever love is coming, man. I really appreciate it. I feel weird not paying full attention to the questions and the comments, and I apologize for that.
Well, this has been a great spot for me to be in too, because I normally am not monitoring the chat as it's going on. We've got great folks that are just working with each other and sharing success stories. We've got Lee Bishop and Roger Evans talking about the different homes that they've purchased and the success that they've had. And it's just really awesome to see this community that we have, even from a different angle than I get to normally see it. So, buddy, I know,
Greg, if you wanna download this episode and then cut out all the best parts for editing, you can also have that experience, my friend. Just it's a great experience.
I don't think I would be nearly as good as you on that. You have staked the claim to that one. I will let you run with that, brother.
Noted.
Well, it's 1:30, man. I think we've got one more question from Miguel, and then I think we sort of wrap it up the way we normally do here. So Miguel asked, do you consider any kind of reno or improvement between tenants? I'm not sure what he's talking about specifically there, but I would imagine he's asking how that's probably handled in between the tenants. Do you want to share that from your perspective? I can, of course, fill in the dots there.
Yeah, man. I think JWB handles it and tells me how much, and then I pay for it from the profits that I've had over the past couple of years.
There you go. Yeah, it's passive. It's something that we're going to handle and facilitate for Pablo. If we get into the nuts and bolts of this, when the resident moves out, we're in communication before that. So we get out there and immediately do a scope of work. Our team is doing all this while Pablo is running his business. We're doing a scope of work. We're getting the cost in line. We prepare that for Pablo. We show it to him. We're going to let him know what the costs are going to be. We're going to get his approval. We're going to go to work. We're going to fix that home in a very quick time frame. We're going to put it back on the market. It's going to be rented again. All of this time, all Pablo has to do is look at the quote, give his approval, and we're off to the races. So with that, my friend, hey, I want to say thank you, brother. This is, I can't say that I'm surprised about how just genuine, authentic, transparent you are. That's who you are. That's why I was just so excited that you're, excited and willing to be here and share your story. But I think so many people can relate to your experience here. And I think you're truly, truly helping everybody. And I really, really appreciate you, my man.
Thanks, man. Listen, dude, like I said, I'm not shy about talking of the great influence that you have had in my life, right? Like everything from trusting in me to pull off. I know that this strategy of business development and content creation is unconventional, right? Like you had to buy into this thing, and I think that it has become this really, really positive experience for everybody involved, which was what my vision to design this to be has been. But above and beyond that, man, the amount of time that I get to spend with you, right? Like you said it on my podcast, you don't get to add a lot of new friends to your life because you have 85 employees, 2 kids, a wife, a bunch of great friends, and a really amazing life, man. It's really been such a blessing to be able to have this relationship with you, man. Everything from the way that you treat people to the way that you think about business, to to how you know about real estate and how you help and all these things. I've learned so much from you, man. For me to have the opportunity to come on the show, to just give as well, to add any kind of extra value that I can to this, and to really actually be, for the first time ever, I feel like I am in control of my financial future, right? Like one part of it is the fact that I've never been more confident about my ability to make money, because I think this is my second time around in entrepreneurship, and I'm finishing year 2, and I've realized that that's all it takes. But now this piece has really, really unlocked a certain level of certainty in who I will be in 40 years. That makes me really, really happy to think about that person and to be able to meet that person in 40 years, man. And a lot of it, both the professional piece and the financial piece, is thanks to you, man. So thank you very much, Gregg.
Brother, I just want you to know that means a lot to me. I just want you to know it does. I appreciate you, man. I think it's what's
I know.
as I was just listening to that, at first, what I was thinking is, me and us doing the show together, and me really, jumping on and following your vision. It's the same damn thing that you just did with JWB, right? When we were talking about building the Not Your Average Investor show, you're like, I got this. This is how it's going to roll. And I'm like, this is completely different. Like if you had asked me 2 years ago if I was going to be on social media and doing a weekly show twice a week and enjoying it and all this other stuff, yeah, I'd be like, no, it'd be as likely as you were to be buying a house sight unseen that you're never, in the middle of a pandemic and a COVID year. And an election year.
That's a great realization, bro. Because as you were saying it, I'm like, this is ready, fire, aim. Like my investment strategy, is ready, fire, aim, right? Like I learned a bunch. I'm taking a shot, and then I will adjust as it goes because I believe in what I invested in. But yeah, man, that's really cool. That's a great realization. And listen, thank you everybody that's been a part of this show today specifically, but since January, since we started this thing, the idea that anybody takes 45 minutes to an hour out of a weekday to hang out with us, and the fact that it's now happening, like we have, I mean, what was last week? We had 110 people hang out with us, on the 2 shows,
and 135 on the podcast too. Downloaded
135 podcast downloads. Like the idea that we get to spend this quality time with these quality people is really, really incredible. Thank you for joining us. Join us on Thursday where we break down a property, right? Like we do the JWB rental income property of the week. And we go through that investing kit that you get at jwbwebclass.com. If you sign up for that webinar and you get the free investor kit, you get this property evaluation tool that allows you to like really foresee how your investment is going to perform, and you can mess around with it all you want. If you like what I had to say, you want to buy into this team, which I obviously recommend, go to chatwithjwb.com. And apart from that, Tell your friends. Tell your friends. Join us in the Facebook group. Come to the show. Like, we really are growing a community here. So I'm really happy that we're doing this. And Greg, I'll let you say bye to everybody.
Yeah, well, one last thing is tonight we do the watch party, and I would love for you all to join us in the watch party. You do need to be in the Facebook group, so go to jwbfacebookgroup.com. You can join the group, and then every Tuesday night we replay the show. So if you joined us late, you joined 15 minutes in, you didn't really catch what we were talking about in the beginning, great opportunity. I'm there, 10, 15, 20 of our friends are there, and we're able to chat, chime in, make fun of each other. I get made fun of a lot, so that's always a good thing. Especially when I ask the question wrong or answer the question wrong. People love that, I've found, in the watch party. So jump on tonight, and I'm certainly looking forward to hanging out with you guys there. And thank you again. We'll catch you on Thursday for the property of the week. See you, everybody.
Adios.